everyone, this is Instructor Jackson. I'm really excited to begin this semester with you, and I'm excited to be back with you guys again. So I am here just to give you a quick overview of Nursing 101C, which is the clinical and lab component of Nursing 101. So basically, for Nursing 101, I know it's kind of confusing. You have your theory aspect of the course, which I believe is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but you'll have to check on that. And that is taught by Dr. Ray and Dr. Wooster. Then you'll have lab on either Tuesdays or Thursdays, depending on what section you're in, from 8 a.m. to noon. And then the opposite day, so if you have lab Tuesdays, you'll have clinical Thursdays and vice versa. So then there's the clinical aspect of the class, which is going to be from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So make sure you pay close attention to what section you're in so that you know what days you have clinical versus lab. So we're going to go ahead and start here on the homepage of the Canvas course here. So you'll see at the very top here is going to be any recent announcements. That's just my welcome announcement, kind of talking about a few housekeeping things. This is the welcome page here, so this is what you'll see whenever you pull up this Canvas course. So if you are in C1, you will have lab on Tuesdays from 8 to noon, and if you also have clinical on Thursdays from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. If you are in C3, you will have lab on Thursdays from 8 a.m. to noon, and you'll have clinical on Tuesdays from 7 a.m. to 5. Now, you might see when we pull up the calendar that this clinical time might vary depending on the day, so just please make sure you look at your course calendar. We will never go before 7 a.m. or after 5 p.m., but there might be days where we start later or end earlier. So moving down here, we have our course calendar. I recommend taking a look at this, printing it off to have for your own records. So green is section C3 and purple is section C1, so that's why it's really important to know what section you are in. I'd recommend highlighting, your portions. So this first week here, next week, we're already starting back up to classes. So January 24th, we will all be on campus. C3 will run from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and we will meet in Walsh 84. We will be doing clinical orientation with that group, discussing medication administration, and doing some dosage calculation. C1, you have clinical on Tuesdays, so that means you have lab on Tuesdays. So you're going to be in the lab from 8 a.m. to noon, and that is going to be a skills review day, so we'll talk about that more in a minute. Then on the 26th, on Thursday, we'll flip-flop. C1 has clinical on Thursdays, so they're going to have their clinical orientation from 8 to 5, medication administration, and dosage calculation. And then C3 will have lab, so 8 to noon, skills review lab. Notice that both C1 and C3 need to be wearing scrubs, so that full-blown nursing uniform up to expectations, just like last semester. That is because we have the blessing of the hands ceremony on Thursday, and this is a special ceremony where we do exactly that. We bless your hands before you go to clinical. It's a very special ceremony, so that will be from 11:30 a.m. to noon. Moving on to week 2, you'll see on the 31st we have inclusive communities, and again we're wearing our nursing uniform. That is going to be for C3 from 8 to 4. And C1 will have lab, so they're going to be doing, from 8 to noon, they're going to be doing EPIC and glucometer training. This will be partially on campus and partially at a training center, so we'll give you more information about that. And again, both C1 and C3 are wearing scrubs that day. So Thursday that week, the group that had lab on Tuesday will now have inclusive communities from 8 to 4, so C1, and C3 will have lab from 8 to noon, so EPIC training, glucometer training. A little confusing those first 2 weeks, but from here on out it gets pretty straightforward. If you have clinical on Tuesdays, you have clinical on Tuesdays, and you have lab on Thursdays. If you have lab on Tuesdays, then you have clinical Thursdays, and vice versa. So pretty straightforward from here. There are some exceptions. You'll also see on this left side kind of what we're covering in lab this week, as well as any exams or skills checks that will be due. So definitely keep that for your records. This is the detailed calendar, so another thing that'd be important for you to print off. This is where we're actually going to go down into the nitty-gritty of what we're doing each week, what skills we're learning, things like that. So pay attention to this top part here. You've got your date and week, the content we'll be discussing, and activities, and then any assignments due. So if there's assignment listed here, that would mean it is due at the start of lab, which is 8 a.m. So this first week you'll see there's no assignments because it's the first day. There's lab and clinical orientation, medication administration, discussion, and lecture. We're going to review dosage calc, chapters 6 through 11, and then any prep assignments, you'll just want to visit Canvas for that, and you'll see why here in a bit. Activities, we're going to do the course orientation. We're going to do skills reviews from skills that you learned in 100 and 103. We're going to do that blessing of the hand ceremony on the 26th, and then here are all the medication administration skills we will be covering that first week. Now you'll see here in bold assignment 1. So any assignments that are assigned that day will show on this activity area. So that means this assignment will be due next time you come to lab. So when you go down to week 2, you'll see that there is this assignment 1, which was assigned up here. It is due at the start of lab onto Canvas. So week 2, we have inclusive communities. We'll do CHI login verification and blood glucose monitoring. And then here you see the activity is learning the skill, doing that inclusive communities, and there's a specific schedule on the Canvas module. And the assignment is going to be an inclusive communities reflection. So when you scroll down on week 3, there's going to be that assignment. As we start moving into more assignments, more content, we will be having these skill templates that we will use as prep. So I'm not going to go into that too much right now. We'll discuss that on orientation day. So definitely just keep this for your reference here. Sometimes the modules won't open until about a week before we are actually learning the content so that you can kind of really focus on what we're learning. But this way you do have like kind of a rough estimate of what we're learning throughout the semester. Alrighty, so clinical paperwork drop boxes. So after you are done with clinical, you will have clinical paperwork that you will need to submit. So everyone will go to this clinical paperwork drop boxes, except if you are going to off-site observation. That's something different. But you'll click this clinical paperwork drop boxes. You'll look at what date. So say it's this, February 14th and 16th is the day we're going to. You'll click that week, and you will submit into the Dropbox your paperwork, whether it's pictures of your paperwork if it's handwritten legibly or a typed document. And then this is where your clinical instructor will be able to grade your paperwork. This is also the rubric for clinical if you are interested in looking at that. So going back to the home page here, this at the bottom here are your learning modules. So there is a module for each week. So that way, we're in week 1, we can go to the week 1 module, and that's going to tell us everything we need to know for that week, as well as any prep assignments due when you get to class that week, things like that. So those are the weekly modules. And then over here is going to be all of your clinical information. So general clinic information, it's going to bring you to like different information about your clinical sites, the paperwork, things along those lines. And then clinical is going to run a little bit differently depending on what section you're in. So if you are in C3, you will have clinical on Tuesdays at Madonna and Midlands. So those are the 2 tabs that will be important to you. If you have clinical on Thursdays and you're C1, you will have clinical at Bergen and Midlands. So these will be the 2 tabs important to you. These tabs will just have a little bit more information about the clinical site. VSIM information is going to be another clinical site. So you will rotate through VSIM no matter if you are in C1 or C3, and that's going to be an on-campus experience. So when you do get to that point, this will be where you'll want to find that information. Then off-site clinical experiences, also known as observation. You will get to do at least 2 of these each this semester, and they are experiences such as shadowing in the wound care clinic or shadowing respiratory therapy. Basically an opportunity for you to kind of see something outside of the clinical setting, and it will still be on your clinical days. So you'll be told more about that as time goes on. Going down here before we jump into the modules, this is that Start Here button that you see on every Canvas page. Just kind of information about the college and resources available to you. The orientation PowerPoint is going to be up here, but we will discuss that on the orientation day, instructors, your syllabus, and then your course calendar. So these learning modules will lock until about a week before we actually review the content. The reason for that is we really want you to focus as much as you can on the content that we are learning. Now, if you do want to get ahead on like the skill prep template sheets, which we'll talk about, you will know which ones are due which weeks based off this detailed lab calendar. So don't be alarmed by that. We're going to go into week 1 and kind of talk about that first. So here, there's always going to be a little introduction to what we're doing, the lessons we're learning, and then the learning outcomes over here. There is some editing right here I need to do before it's published, so disregard this. Your syllabus, your course calendar, and then the video that I'm making right now, I will have it linked right here. Handouts, any handouts that you might need for the week. So for this coming week, we're going to have an orientation PowerPoint, so if you're the kind of person that likes to print things out, then you definitely can. We're going to review dosage calculation PowerPoint, so that's chapters 6 through 11. We're going to learn medication administration, so definitely one you might want to print out. These are the medication administration skill sheets, which we'll talk about in a second, and these are the Nursing 100 and 103 skills to review for that review day. So medication administration skill sheets, when you click this, it will take you to a module with all of these skill sheets here. So when you click these, if you're kind of a person that likes to take it step by step rather than looking at the book steps, you can refer to these skill sheets, and these are what we're going to be using to do your skill checkoffs. Some of these are ones the book created, and some are the ones that I created. So this is an example of one that I created here. And feel free to print these off if you like to have, a physical copy. So very similar to like what you had last semester. And then there are some that are from the book, like the website. So they're a little bit more procedural. But that is where you will find your skill sheets. I've always linked those in the modules that are appropriate. Going back to this week here. Okay, so down here is learning plan and activities. Again, really want to make sure you know if you're in C1 or C3, because that is going to really depend on where you go and what your schedule looks like. Not just this next week, but for the entire semester. So Tuesday on 124, section C3 is clinical Tuesdays. So please expect to be there from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Tuesday. And we're going to meet in Walsh 84. We're going to do orientation to both clinical and lab, just because we're going to knock it all out together. We're going to do dosage calculation, chapters 6 through 11. This is all information you learned last semester, so we're just going to review it. We're going to do lunch, and then we'll come back and do medication administration lecture and skills practice. And I do expect this to take the full day. I know it's a long day, but there's a lot of information that I need to be giving you guys. And I want you to be prepared with how to do med administration before you get to clinical. You should bring your Treyas, Barnett, and Smith book on this day, as well as your dosage calculation book. Then C1, you have lab on Tuesdays, so you will be in lab from 8 to noon. You will meet in the nursing lab, and instructor Nelson will be there to help with the lab portion of things. So she is going to just give you a quick orientation to the lab. You guys are already familiar with the lab, so that should go pretty fast. And then you're going to be doing a skills review. And that is going to be a pretty student-led review day where we will have different stations for you to practice all of the skills that you learned in Nursing 100 and 103. So that's where this comes into play. These are just like the actual checkoff documents of those skills if you need a little refresher before coming to this review day. It'll be a lot more like active learning and real life type stuff. We do have some level 3 students that are going to come help out on this day as well, so just be prepared for that. You will need to bring a writing utensil and a stethoscope if you've already purchased one. All right, so Thursday, 126, notice it says nursing uniform. We are all going to be wearing a nursing uniform that day. C1 has clinical on Thursdays, so expect to be there from 8 to 5, meet in Walsh 84, and they're going to do the exact same thing that C3 did on Tuesday, but on Thursday. C3 has lab, meeting in the nursing lab from 8 to noon, and they're again going to do the same thing that C1 did on Tuesday. The only differences here are we have the blessing of the hand ceremony for both C1 and C3 from 11:30 to noon, And then C3, I also want you to bring a copy of the clinical paperwork that I will be giving you on Tuesday because you'll use it in lab. On each page, you will have yellow boxes, which is prep before lab. This week is an exception because you have prep for clinical orientation too, because we're actually teaching content. But anything in this yellow prep for lab is required prep work before attending class. There might be some things that you have to physically turn in, such as the skill templates, but we'll go over that more in depth. But make sure you do all these things before attending lab. That will help you be the most successful. Then this is before attending clinical orientation. So clinical orientation is 126 for C1 and 124 for C3. This looks extremely overwhelming, I know. In future weeks, you will be expected to watch the videos and review either the skill sheets or the book steps before coming to lab. And the reason for that is because we really want you to be as prepared as you can and know the skill as much as you can before coming to lab so that we can be really purposeful with practicing that skill and make it a little bit more real life rather than having to demo every single one of these skills because that would take the full 4 hours of lab. So this first week though, if you have time to review, that would be wonderful. However, I'm not going to be like the biggest stickler on that this first week since we are going to be kind of jam-packing you with so much content. All right, and then after lab is going to be these green boxes. So anything in this box is going to be due by 8 a.m. the following lab day that you have, unless it is otherwise specified, which it will say right next to it if it's something different. So this first week, you'll need to make sure you have your CHI login for the following week and complete assignment number 1, medication administration and dosage calc, and then ensure that you have your ticket to class or your prep done by week 2. So you could click this and it will bring you to week 2. So it looks very similar, but not nearly as much information as week 1. So you'll have, our lesson for the day, learning outcomes, handouts. Whenever you're in lab, we will do the CHI login training at their conference center, and then we'll come back to campus and practice blood glucose management. And then when you go to clinical, clinical is actually just going to be on campus because we're going to do inclusive communities in ward. Prep before lab, prep before clinical, and then assignment after lab or clinical. So I know that was kind of a lot of information. I know this class can be a little bit confusing, so I at least wanted to give you that brief overview that way. Once you've watched this video, at least kind of know a little bit about it so you're not super confused next week. I am really excited for this course. I've been working really hard to get it all prepped for you guys and ready, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it and start to feel more like nurses as you're learning all of your fundamental skills to become nurses. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Otherwise, I will see you all next Tuesday.